There you go. So we will take questions at the end as soon as we get through all of our content. But start off, we're going to be talking about building a solid foundation. It is the new year. And all of the things we're going to be talking about are things that, with all of the clients that we work with, both on our consulting side, where we do grant writing and impact evaluation, and on our incubation side, where we do trainings just like this and fiscal sponsorship. These are all the things that I really want our clients to be working on because they only enhance the work that we do, slightly selfishly. But also, all of these things we see in super successful nonprofits who are fundraising successfully, who are really developing best practices, advocating successfully on behalf of the people that they are working with and the communities that they're in. So I really want to emphasize these these are important to really taking this year and scaling and growing in ways that are healthy and sustainable. So a little bit about us up front. Mockingbird Incubator is an incubator of brand new nonprofits who are emerging. You might be a new founder, you might be switching into an executive director role, but you're in a place where you're learning and growing your organization. So we developed Mockingbird Incubator after years of working in the nonprofit space ourselves, and then several years into our work on Mockingbird Analytics, Pamela, Adro, and I got together and said, you know what? There's a lot of people out there that are founding nonprofits with the best parts and sort of the most beautiful vision for a world and community. However, being a nonprofit is very specific and very difficult. And there are lots of gatekeeping rules in place. And what can we do to help people get ready to be successful at grant writing, to do amazing, groundbreaking work? And what we landed on is this incubator. So all of the work we do helps build administrative infrastructure for brand new emerging nonprofits so they can get to the point where you'll be competitive for grants and doing all of the amazing community building work that you have inside of yourself. And that has transformed. We've graduated more than 10 cohorts at this point, more than 100 organizations, and we are recruiting for a new cohort now that's being sponsored by GiveButter. So if you enjoy this presentation, this is a really good small sample of what goes on in the incubator. So if you're happy at the end of this, please go ahead and apply. We'd love to have you. The program is free. And we accept 20 organizations per cohort. So, and we'll talk more about that. But goals for today, we want you to really get a strong grounding philosophically in the broader context which nonprofits operate in and our philosophical approach to that. I think a lot of people come into the nonprofit space and think it's just like the for-profit space, but we are actually taking a very different approach to the work that we do. We want to make some clear we want to provide you some clarity about the different legal structures if you're in the very beginning idea stage, deciding what's right for you. And talk a little bit about sort of what does compliance look like over a year. And then we want to talk about partners because I feel like this is a really neglected area of nonprofit work and is one of the things that comes from transitioning from a sort of for-profit mindset to a more nonprofit ecosystem mindset. So, and then last but not least, I really want to tell you a little bit more about our incubator program, which Ned and Danielle, who I saw drop in, participated in the fall. they can tell you a little bit more about that as well. But if you're just joining us, if you can drop in the chat where you're from, what organization you're with, and then one thing you would like to learn today. I'm going to take questions at the end, answer as many as I can, but let's dive in. So we're going to start with understanding the nonprofit landscape and navigating ecosystems. So it's really important to recognize how unique nonprofit work is. 501c3 status, being a nonprofit, is a tax designation, and that in some ways can shape the work that you're doing. But it's really important to sort of be mindful that a tax designation should not be defining you. It is not the box all of your work has to fit in necessarily. It is a way to deal with money. But there is a very specific culture involved in being a nonprofit. So nonprofits are really characterized by this mission to serve the community. We still function within the parameters of capitalism. We still have to talk about money, but we're doing it a little bit differently. So one of the main things that we like to talk about is you're making a benefits exchange with the IRS when you become a 501c3. Every nonprofit starts out as a for-profit. You file articles of incorporation in your state, and then you go to the IRS and you tell them, okay, I am incorporated, but the work I am going to be doing benefits the community. And that's why I should be exempt from taxes. And so, in exchange for not paying taxes on the work you do, income taxes, uh, uh, all the taxes that you would be required to pay if you were for profit, instead, you are exchanging that for having a governing board who are there to really represent the interests of the public. And so you have some extra oversight and some extra requirements for transparency because you're getting this special benefit. One of the other things that's really important to keep in mind in terms of nonprofit culture is that the focus of every nonprofit's work, whatever they're doing, and whatever that means, should be focusing on transformative justice, weaving together holes in the social safety net that are not being addressed through other means, either the public or the private sector, and should be focusing on repair and acceptance, and advancing communities. From both a systemic perspective and on an individual level as well. One other really, really important part of doing nonprofit, especially if you're just getting into the work now, is acknowledging the intersections of the work that you are doing. Oftentimes, marginalized identities come in groups. So people are not just dealing with racism usually, they're also dealing with poverty and all kinds of intersecting things that are making navigating what they are and the social issues that we are addressing through our work even more difficult. And a lot of times nonprofits get very focused on their own one issue. However, when we do our work from our philosophical sort of standpoint, we really lean into having more comprehensive solutions that we do. One of the amazing things, and I'm going to call out Ned right now because I know he's here, is the way that we can sort of weave our work together. Ned's work crosses between public art, addressing climate change, and historic work. So all of our work is intersectional in very many ways, and it's really important to be acknowledging that throughout the work that you do and not getting too focused on the one thing and coming from a place of competition with other organizations. We're all here to make the world a better place, and the reality is that no one organization is going to solve something like homelessness. It's going to take all of us together doing the work. So really important sort of mindset shift. We'll talk a little bit more about ecosystems theory, which I've mentioned. Nonprofit ecosystems theory has been around a long time. It really sort of gained traction, at least in my mind, through the work of Adrienne Marie Brown and emergent strategy, and really sort of posits the idea that no social justice work exists in isolation. We are all better together, just like an ecosystem supports itself in many different ways with many different actors. The same thing goes for effective social justice and movement work. The attitude is we need everybody together in order to advance collective change. And this really goes back to what I mentioned with our work being intersectional and acknowledging the co-occurring needs of housing and food security and social justice and work within the carceral systems, as well as repair of previous harms that have been done to communities. So that's nonprofit ecosystems theory. I hope you will go read Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. It is a sort of brilliant and like really beautiful poetic look at the interweavings of how social justice work can be transformative in community. And I want to totally switch gears from this very sort of philosophical place that drives our work to talking about the nuts and bolts of legal governance and the baselines that all nonprofits need to meet. So let's first talk about all the sort of common IRS designations, because I know there are so many of them. We're going to touch on just sort of the most common ones that we tend to see. But if you are questioning whether 501c3 status is right for you or something else, please make sure you check with an accountant or an attorney, especially when it comes to the designation with foundations versus nonprofits. That can get a little sticky, and you want to make sure you do that right, because if you file for the wrong designation, whether it's 501c3, 501c4, 527, it takes a long time to correct if you don't have the right one. So just to sort of set the baseline, I hope all of you know this already, but I think it's really important to be sort of like continually in conversation with these ideas. 501c3 charitable organizations are doing all of these works listed, but they also have limited lobbying capacity, but their donations are tax deductible. So most organizations that are providing some kind of direct service work are 501c3s. So if you are providing education, housing, food security, environmental services, all of those are perfect for the 501c3 designation. Then there is also 501c4, which is social welfare organizations. The biggest difference with 501c4s is 501c4s have a greater ability to lobby, which lobbying means that you get to talk to your elected representatives and spend a substantial part of your time and budget working to change legislation. When it comes to 501c4s, any donations made are not tax deductible. Then we have 527s, which are political organizations, and they exist to influence the outcomes of elections or defeat political candidates. So more than just trying to get policy and legislation changed, they are to support individual people as well. And then one last one that I want to mention, 501c9. These are voluntary employee benefit associations. These take a bunch of different forms, but they could be a labor union, they could be a benefits organization, a coalition of some sort, and they're helpful in order to sort of like advance policy within specific sectors as well. So if you have questions about these, I can tell you lots and lots and lots of things about 501c3s, but you get diminishing returns from me talking about all the other designations. So definitely talk to a lawyer about what designation is right for you. And again, especially if you are doing work that borders on foundation work versus direct service. So the other things I want to talk about is governing boards, because I think a lot of people, even if they are running a board and work in the nonprofit space, kind of forget what the point of having a board is, because they get involved in running a board and stop thinking about like what is the true function of a board. Well, number one, a board, you have to have a board if you were a 501c3. The IRS mandates it, and it's because of what we talked about earlier, that need in the benefits exchange for more transparency and oversight, because you are not paying taxes on profited income. So there's a couple different types of board. The one that is required is this governing board, which is an elected group of individuals that are there to serve for terms within your organization to represent the interests of the public. And governing board members have a fiduciary duty to the organization. If you are like me, and fiduciary is not a term that you use other than when you talk about this. A fiduciary is somebody who holds a legal or ethical relationship of trust within an organization, which should sound like exactly what the IRS wants a board to do, which is represent the interests of the public. And so governing board members have the ability to do some sort of big decision making within an organization. Then on the flip side, we have advisory boards who are a little bit different. They are not required. You don't have to have an advisory board. But advisory boards can be really helpful for very sector or issue specific advice that you need. But the organization is not legally mandated to take that advice. It's just helpful to be around professionals who work in education and can help inform some of your policy work that you might be doing. They don't have sort of formal duties necessarily, and you don't have to have an advisory board. But again, helpful to have around. And then there's this third type of board that can be very helpful, especially if you're probably here because you are building a foundation. They can help set the groundwork for a new or emerging organization. So working boards tend to be sort of like this secondary characteristic or overlay on a working board. So you could ask your governing board to also be a working board, and it will be their job to help set up the systems, do some of the work running the nonprofit until it's ready to have employees do the work. We always recommend that a working board should be very time limited and goal driven. You should not have a working board forever. I see organizations all the time that are permanently run by an all volunteer board. And frankly, to me, that is a very slippery model, and does not necessarily end successfully. I just spent a year on a working board, and to be honest, it was impossible to get anything done in that year. Not having staff members dedicated full time to the work of the organization eventually ends up being a crutch for an organization. So that's why we talk about make it goal driven. The working board should only be doing the work of the organization until it's ready to hire or something is completed. But this is a really common sort of extra set of support that you can ask for when you're in a new and emerging organization, building a foundation to talk more about the work that you do and really establish and set things up. So if you have any questions while I'm going through this, please drop them in the chat. I'll go through them at the end and do my best to answer everything. But let's keep going. One of the other things that is so important to sort of setting your foundation throughout the rest of this year is managing your board well, because a well-managed board is a tremendous asset to an organization. It is the backbone of support that the IRS has built into the work of nonprofits. A not well-managed board is a disaster and takes up a lot of time and air in a room. So making sure that your board is taking up the space and actually being helpful is one of the foundations to making sure your organization scales this year. So a couple of things that are key to that are making sure you have very clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Boards who don't know what they're doing will either do nothing or they'll find work to do on their own that is not part of the general strategic plan. So they'll get in the way. So there's sort of two outcomes for a board that doesn't know what they're doing. Neither of them are good. A well-managed board has regular meetings. You should at least be meeting quarterly, and this is a compliance measure because you're going to need minutes from those meetings, at least quarterly, to make sure that the board is actually working to represent the interests of the public. A well-managed board gets training and development support as well. Not everybody coming into a board has the same set of experience or skills or assets to give. So it's really important to make a board part of your professional development goals for the organization. Also, diversity and inclusion, making sure that you've got the most diverse group of people with lived experience reflecting the community you serve. This is a sea change from the reality of many boards in past decades. This was not a priority, and as we are doing a better job talking about diversity, inclusion, intersectionality, boards that are going to successfully support your work are going to actually hold these values and work to bring them into your organization even more. A well-managed board is also going to actually provide that fiduciary financial oversight to the organization that fulfills the IRS requirement. So your board should always be involved in making financial decisions, major financial decisions with your organization. That's why for our incubator program, we have our board pick the winner of our seed grant. That's why every time we get a fiscal sponsorship application, our board approves it, because that is a major financial undertaking. And as fiduciaries, they should consent to those major financial decisions. So it is up to you to define in your bylaws what types of decisions the boards need to make. But anything that impacts their liability should definitely be taken to the board at large. And then the last thing I think that's really important is to get your board doing some level of self-assessment and identifying their own needs for additional professional development or engagement. They have a skill that has not been utilized yet, and integrate that into your strategic planning work for the year as well. So this is just sort of a quick list of all of the things that are really helpful. board engagement and board development is its own, not even workshop, it's its own series. But I think it's really incredibly important to keep these things in mind as you're thinking about sort of what is this foundation that I need for this year for scalability and developing the best practices of organization. Okay, so in addition to all of this board work and getting all that lined up in your foundation, let's talk about compliance as well, because there's so many little things that you have to do to maintain compliance that I think get lost potentially, especially when you're new and figuring out the difference between, okay, how do I maintain compliance in a nonprofit? Because that's very different than how a for-profit maintains their status. You need to maintain a registered agent and you have to file your annual reports. If you're in California, you have to register with the Attorney General's Registry of Charitable Trusts and update that every year. You also, jumping ahead a little bit, but you'll have to file your 990 form as well. That is a nonprofit's version of filing your taxes, and I believe it's due May 15th. Don't quote me on this. It's usually due May 15th. So different deadline than personal taxes, but you do need to file that every year, and there's different levels of filing. So if you're brand new, filing the 990 postcard, which is called the 990N, is super easy. You could do it yourself, take 20 minutes. But if you're going to file that full 990, make sure you're getting help with that as well. You're also going to have to go back to your state as well and fulfill their reporting requirements. Again, in California, it's the Attorney General's Registry of Charitable Trusts, but you have to go back sort of at every governmental level to sort of check in every year with them to sort of show them where you're at to maintain your compliance. Really important for licensing compliance as well to make sure that your current and planned fundraising activities are registered. If you do, in California, there's special rules around sort of gaming-based fundraising, making sure that you're aware of those and getting the right permissions, and maintain that your charitable solicitation status across all states. One of the big stumbling blocks for organization is online donation solicitation means that you need to be registered to receive donations in any state that you receive money from. So if you're like us in California, but receive a donation from Texas, we need to make sure that we're registered in the state of Texas to receive that donation. And the state of Texas will get notified if somebody writes off on their charitable deductions for the year that I made this donation. Oh, but this nonprofit is not registered in your state. So something really important to think about. It's something that comes as kind of a shock sometimes to our incubator participants. And we talk a lot about that through our program. A couple of really key governance policies that you're going to have to maintain over time that you might not get asked for every year, but you're going to need on record in case you do get audited. Keeping adequate and complete records, conducting those board meetings so you have minutes saying that we have a governing board who is maintaining their fiduciary duties, maintaining a conflict of interest policy, whistleblower policies, and maintaining your bylaws and making sure that they are accurate and up to date. If you have any questions about this, my number one advice is to get a nonprofit tax or accountant, or a lawyer as well. Nothing that I'm telling you today is a substitute for legal and accounting advice. This is all just best practices based on how we run our nonprofit. Just want to cover myself there. So section 3, what I want to talk about, and this is a little bit different foundationally from the other things that we've talked about, the philosophy and the compliance, is a hole we see a lot of times with organizations that we work with. And that's partnering with other mission aligned organizations. And I think this really is a result of for-profit ideology impacting nonprofit ecosystems. So I want to talk about partnerships and what they could look like and sort of what needs to go into those agreements, because this is the way that you are going to strengthen your ecosystem and contribute to the good of sort of the community and the whole that you're working towards. Because again, we're not going to solve homelessness alone. We are not going to solve food insecurity alone. It's incredibly important that we build these really tight relationships within our ecosystems that address some of the gaps and barriers that people encounter getting services.
You're breaking up a little.
Uh-oh.
Jessica, you just broke up a lot. I didn't hear what you said there. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem, Ned. My internet connection said it was insecure for a moment. Hopefully it's better now.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the different types of nonprofit partnerships to consider, because I think there's a couple different ways we can work together in community. The number one way is through sort of like spreading across financial resources, so co-applicant partnerships. I think for lots of organizations, it doesn't occur to them to apply with an organization for potentially like grant funding. But the reality is foundations actually really love a partnership because it increases the impact of your work. It covers more bases. It more securely sort of like weaves together that hole in the social safety net that might exist. So definitely when you're considering applying for funding, if you feel like you're not able to meet all of the requirements by the funder, find a partner to go in with it and figure out a way to work together. Um, that's a pretty common way of doing the work, and I think really underutilized given how much foundations actually kind of like it. The other thing is providing those complementary services, and that could be about geography, co-locating childcare nonprofit work with parenting groups or um, or workforce development services, because we know that many of the barriers to changing careers, getting a better job, doing workforce development might be childcare or any kind of caregiving. So make sure that geographically you're near a set of support systems.
Pamela Goody.
Waking up, Jessica. I think we missed like 30 seconds at the beginning.
Sorry. What's the last thing y'all heard?
I think I missed the whole thing.
Did you miss the whole thing?
Yeah.
Co-applicant partnerships and then
no, internet. We're about to get a giant like it's called a Pineapple Express storm, and I think it's kind of like messing with our internet. So I apologize. But so co-applicant partnerships, this is a way to apply to grant funds together because it increases your impact. The other thing is complementary services, and this is about finding ways to support people through the gaps in the system that might create a barrier to somebody actually accessing your services. So that to me, the best way to demonstrate that is through sort of like geography and co-location, where you will maybe co-locate your workforce development services near an organization that does caregiver support or child care, because we know that that can be a barrier to somebody having the time to develop in a new career that will support their family. Another way that we can partner with other organizations is a resource exchange. It's really important in our work that we sort of understand the landscape of the work being done across our ecosystem, and we don't create redundancy. We add to that. Redundancy is what creates that sort of toxic competition that we are trying to get away from as we build community and movement spaces. Very helpful to think of sort of blended services model where one nonprofit will address one component of education if you're providing education services, and then your organization will come in and do another part of that, like a co-teaching model. Very, very helpful. And then last, and this is not the only kind of partnerships, there's also mergers, which I was not prepared to discuss today. But coalition, having an organization that brings together people within that ecosystem is incredibly helpful in amplifying a group of agencies' work. We are stronger together. I think all nonprofits should be working within some coalition, even if they're not the ones running it. Being part of the sort of broader community-based network of service providers is incredibly important to support this sort of ecosystem model that we've been talking about. And a coalition is also much more effective if you are doing some level of lobbying or advocacy, like we talked about earlier, because individually 501c3s are pretty limited in the amount of lobbying that they can do towards better policies. So a couple of things that I want to highlight as well when it comes to sort of this foundation of support for your organization in this next year is when you are doing this partnering with mission-aligned organizations, you should have an MOU, write it down, make it formal. Otherwise, it's hard to remember who agreed to what. So put together an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding that sort of outlines everybody's roles in that partnership. Know what you need versus what you're willing to offer as well in terms of sort of your tangible contribution and what would be helpful as well. So in that MOU, things that we want you to consider is your mission alignment, your shared objectives for working together, the reputation and values that you want to be aligned with, the capacity and resources that you need versus the ones that you bring to the table, as well as sort of the legal and ethical compliance of the organization. You would not want to be partnered with an organization that you know is out of compliance with the Attorney General's office, because that could threaten your ability to get co-applicant funding. Think about the sustainability of the model. Is this something that after you try out this partnership, it's going to continue for multiple years, or is it something that you're going to try once and then it's going to go away? Think through what governance and decision making are going to look like, who is in charge of making the ultimate decisions about how funds get spent, about how services get designed, how we decide together. Also, you should be doing a risk assessment and considering the sort of financial impact. Do not forget to calculate like fringe benefits as part of the work that you are doing as well to support your workers. And then also we want to make sure that we build into any MOU with a partnership ways to circle back and learn from what we did. So monitoring and evaluation, metrics, what will be successful, what are questions doing this work together, and how will they be answered? So those are the basics of what we want to see when you put together this plan for partnership and an MOU. You can find lots of MOU templates online. I would at least get a review before with a lawyer, especially if what you're doing is applying to co-applicant funds, just to make sure everything is above board. So, section 4 is a little bit different. Now we're going to be talking about setting priorities for stability and scalability. And this is really the like, what do I do next section? Because we know being a founder, being an executive director, you're wearing a billion hats. You're bouncing from contracts to your board to making sure programs get delivered and deciding about best practices and HR things and all of these things. So like what of all of these things, what do you focus on now? Well, the things that are very important to us and that we see when you're successfully building this foundation for your organization are creating policies that support clients' employees. Nonprofits are sort of notoriously difficult places to work, partially because there's this tremendous scarcity, both in the ethos of the work and in the like actual resources available. So making sure that we are supporting our employees in ways that are in alignment with how we are supporting our community. We cannot make the world this is slightly spicy, but you're not making the world a better place if you are abusing your employees in order to take care of other people. So that to me is an incredibly important criteria for the foundation of success long term. Maintaining organizational compliance. We talked a lot about what that is. That will always be really important. That's why I have this as the second priority here. How you treat people will always be first, but second, making sure you maintain that so that you can do all of the other movement-based work that comes with being in a nonprofit and working on social justice issues. The other thing I really want you to focus on, and we haven't gotten into this today, but our incubator program does address in sort of much greater detail, is strengthening your income streams through diversification. Doing grant writing and like fund analysis, fund development work. We see organizations who have a very lopsided and very unstable fundraising model all the time. And the best thing you can do to stabilize and scale your organization is to make sure that you have a diverse set of funding streams and are not dependent on one source. Especially not majority grant funded, because grants can be very difficult to get and very easy to lose through no fault of your own. So we want to make sure all of our clients are doing as many different fundraising activities as possible. Then last but not the least important by far is making sure that you're getting your financial tracking systems in place. This will only help with grant writing and making sure that you are as competitive as possible for those grants. It will only make it easier for maintaining compliance if you have your financial ducks in a row. And if you are doing correct financial tracking, it will give you the ability to support your employees and save for the benefits that make their lives tangibly better as well. One of the crises that we are facing as a sector is burnout and how we treat our employees. And I think that has to change in order for the nonprofit sector to continue sustaining ourselves through really difficult work. And the key to that is being able to figure out how to pay for the benefits that actually support people. And that heals half of the social problems that are created as well. So a couple of helpful documents that can support this foundation that you're building that we would love to see you create is a strategic plan. This is the ultimate product of participating in our incubator program. We like to see new organizations just create a 1-year plan at a time. If you're brand new, things are going to change so drastically. You're gonna learn so much in a year that creating a multi-year plan, you'd throw it out after a year. It wouldn't be relevant anymore. So unless you are Goodwill or Catholic Charities, United Way, one of the big guys, start with at least a 1-year plan, and then you can graduate to multi-year plans as your organization really establishes itself and is consistent in doing the work, and you're not having such drastic learning. We also love to see people put together a development or fundraising plan. This is a good start to that diversification of income streams we talked about earlier. Having an evaluation plan, doing evaluation only supports your work in fundraising. So we want to see you doing that simultaneously and not getting to the end of your work and saying, what did we achieve? No, we should be tracking that from moment one, because that's going to be the thing that snowballs into additional funding later. Always taking a look at your grant narrative language and continuing to develop that. That also goes for any sort of like public discussion of your work. Your website, your social media should be very consistently aligned with your grant applications, your annual reports, your conversations to funders. When you submit a grant application, the first thing the funder is going to go do is look at your website. And if they see you talking about something totally different that doesn't make sense to what you're asking for in that request for funding, you are endangering their understanding of you as an organization. So making sure that you're in alignment across the narrative and the marketing material. So grant language and marketing materials go very much hand in hand. And the more you can ground your discussion of your work in literature, recent studies, models of practice, the better. So all of these really important to studying and supporting the sort of foundations of your work. And then last, I like to throw in, especially for people building a foundation with their work, this slide on what should I get help with versus DIY, because I know like emerging nonprofits are working on a shoestring budget. Half the time they're doing things themselves and learning as you're wearing a million hats. So the things that I, as somebody who runs a nonprofit and works with nonprofits and like lives, breathes, like blood, sweat, and tears all the time, social justice work and nonprofits, the justifiable things I tell all of our clients to pay for upfront, it's worth it, is financial services first and foremost. This has the ability to tank your organization if done wrong. It is not worth DIYing this. Get a professional to do your bookkeeping, your accounting, your 990s. It is the very first justifiable expense that will only support the rest of your work. Unless you are a professional bookkeeper, accounting, have that background, or have a board member who is donating that services and has a special knowledge of nonprofit bookkeeping. Please let this be the first additional help you bring into your organization. The other thing is database setup. I think technological tools are so great and can help so much with streamlining the services that we provide, making sure that we're able to serve people to our best ability and understand what best practices are. However, We do a good amount of technology work as sort of capacity building, and I would say more than half of the clients that come to us come with a product that was set up improperly or they were sold on, but then it turns out it wasn't quite what they were looking for because sales people will tell you anything to get you to buy the product. So making sure you get professional help deciding what database is right for you, help setting it up because it will, in terms of time and cost, take you a lot longer to fix things than it will to upfront get things set up exactly as you need. And I have some very specific opinions about different platforms you can ask me about after this. So if you're using something, let me know and I might be able to sort of give you some hot tips. The other thing is website design. We see a lot of bad websites. That's one of the first things when grant clients come to us, we take a look at and say, listen, you're a housing organization. What you look like is a real estate development company. We really need to align the nonprofit, social justice oriented side of your work to what you're saying publicly. Otherwise, a grant application is just going to see you as a for-profit business. So very important to sort of bring on that alignment and do it right. It's worth investing in upfront. But also at the same time, start with a platform that is easy and usable for you to update. Again, I have some hot takes that I can share. If you have any questions about platforms, I don't like to sort of like call out products individually, but most nonprofits websites should primarily be informational. And so you don't need something incredibly difficult and sophisticated unless you were doing something very technologically specific. Most nonprofits can utilize one of the easier, more DIY website platforms, but make sure you get something beautiful set up. Then there's grant writing. This is also something that we see all of the time because we do grant writing work. I think it's, and obviously I'm not unbiased here, but I think grant writing is one of the services that it makes the most sense because it takes the most specific expertise. There's lots of inside baseball rules about grants. And then on top of that, you're playing the lottery. So I think it's a justifiable expense to get help with grant writing up front. And again, I'm not unbiased and I acknowledge that. The other thing is I wish more organizations who are building their foundation would think about doing some level of award management. So once you win a grant, getting assistance managing grants because managing those budgets can get really onerous. Your bookkeeper or accountant might be able to do that. That's also a service that we provide in addition to the grant writing. But it vastly increases your chances of renewing funds if you are doing your due diligence, using those funds appropriately. I see my typo there, but fiscal sponsorship, Model C or Model A, I'm happy to talk more about those. But those are really helpful ways of getting the support you need to manage your organization's foundation as you grow. So a couple things that I am happy to see people DIY, your social media, make it personal. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful algorithm generated thing. Consistency is really the most important thing. We don't want to go and see dead social media accounts that haven't been posted in 6 months, 2 years, because then we think you're not doing the work anymore. But it's okay to just pick a manageable number of platforms. You don't have to be on every platform. DIY your events. This is a great way to engage your board and bring them in. We had a fundraiser last year, and this year when I came back to our board, I said, I think we want to do this again. This is really successful, but I need more help this year. I can't run a whole event myself, which I did. I took on, I didn't want to ask for help because that's not always the strength. And sometimes it feels easier, but get your board involved in your events. I think that's the most sort of easy thing for people to jump into because it's more accessible than some of the very finite nonprofit stuff. We would love to see you DIY your strategic planning. I see organizations spend tens of thousands of dollars on strategic planning, and like they might get a great product out of that is very dependent on who they hire to do that work. But at the beginning, when you're building this foundation, you can DIY your strategic planning. And if you participate in our incubator program, we will teach you, and the sort of ultimate product that you walk away with from our incubator program is a sort of fully drafted strategic plan that you can then take to your board to adopt and use for the next year for your organization. The last thing is DIY your newsletters and content creation. Those are important, building your audience, but you don't need a professional for that necessarily. MailChimp is easy enough. Your content creation should be in your voice. So those things are worth it. The other things, let other people help you with. So last, I want to talk about our incubator program because this was a really good introduction to what we're going to be teaching in spring 2024. I wonder if our previous participants recognized some of what's going on and some of it was new. But what's going to be happening is we're going to be hosting 20 organizations who are going to get a full scholarship to the program, courtesy of our beloved partner, Give Butter. In addition to that, we give away a grant to one of the participating organizations to help give them a little seed funding to tangibly support your work. We also are providing you a network of founders, people to talk to who are in the same place as you, your potential first set of partners in the work, which is incredibly, incredibly valuable. I've seen our cohorts come together to support each other, and it warms my heart every time to see people supporting each other in that way. We are also, on top of that, going to be doing a spring fundraising campaign. We did this in the fall with Give Butter and Giving Tuesday as well, and it was such a success. Our cohort members raised, I think, more than $55,000 just through their Give Butter campaigns. It was amazing, and we're going to be doing the same thing for a spring fundraising campaign, where anybody who raises the two campaigns that raise the largest amount of money that are part of our cohort, we will do a $500 match. And we're also opening up this to the sort of general population of applicants. So if you apply to the program, don't get in, if you still raise funds on Give Butter, the organization that raises the most, we're also going to do a match with. So that's really cool. I'm really excited to do that because I think we only have so much capacity, but we can absolutely continue to support organizations and want to make sure that we are sort of tangibly investing in the work being done by emerging organizations that are building this foundation just like yourself. So a couple of important dates around that. The application deadline is February 19th, so you got a couple more weeks to get your application in. We will let you know February 23rd whether you're accepted to the cohort program. Again, you can still participate in that spring match program as long as you give us your application and set up your Give Butter account and start fundraising for the spring. And then the program start date is Friday, March 1st. And it runs for 8 consecutive weeks. We do 10 to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And all 8 workshops are required in order to complete the program successfully so that you're eligible for the seed fund grant that we give away. And so by the end of that, we also want you to walk away with this fully drafted strategic plan that touches upon all of these and other areas that we've identified as the goals that nonprofits need for an effective strategic plan. So you can apply now. I can't see this because the way my screen is, but here is the link to our incubator application. It's also on our website as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to be in contact. But I'm going to open it up to Q&A and look through the chat and see if anybody dropped any questions for me. But in the meantime, while I'm doing that, here's our contact information. Here's the application form. If you have any questions, there's the website or our email. Let us know if anything comes up. But if you have any questions from this presentation, drop them in the chat.
I can help you with the ones in the chat.
Okay, I see the first one from Vernita Hubbard. Hi, Vernita. How do we vet for board members? This is a really good question. Thank you, Kayla, by the way. I think it's really important to establish what your needs are as an organization. I always recommend that when you're recruiting for new board members, you get somebody with some kind of financial background. That could be your treasurer, and somebody with a legal background, because that's often a bye Mary. That's often sort of an immediate cost and need for nonprofits, like reviewing contracts. That could be a cost that they offset for the organization. So really thinking about what you need for your organization and what board members could offset as sort of like donated skill-based services is the first thing that I think about. There's other considerations, but those are the 2 things that I think are most important when you're looking for board members. Althea, Pamela can look this up for you while we're here, and she'll answer you in the chat. All right, let's see. How much is the incubator if you don't win the grant? The cost of participating in the cohort program is free. It's sponsored by Give Butter. They are delightful. They're going to help you fundraise through that spring incubator challenge. So it's not going to cost you anything. Hopefully, you are actually going to make money from participating. And then the grant and the match funds and however much you raise on Give Butter on your own campaign is just bonus. So we don't want anybody to walk away with a deficit. We want you to walk away with extra funds in your pocket to do the work that you were made to do. Let's see. I personally was advised to use GoDaddy because it was easier to manipulate, but I am not too tech savvy, and I'm really happy to have made that choice. I've heard good things about GoDaddy. In terms of websites, the 2 that because we do website building as part of our capacity building work, because we see that as supportive to the other services that we provide. The 2 that we use most frequently are Squarespace and Wix. We think those are the easiest platforms. They're they can be maintained inside the organization after somebody with a graphic eye sets everything up really beautifully for you. They still are easy to go in and like update dates in a calendar and stuff like that. So those are the 2 that we really love. The one that I see and cringe is WordPress. I think that is more sophisticated than most organizations need, because most organizations really only need their website to be informational. They don't need like a login for members. If you do need that, then you need something more sophisticated. But if your website purpose is informational, go easy on yourself. You'll save yourself money in the long run. Tiernan asked.
Oh, I was gonna read one at the very beginning. That is, if you can talk more about governance for a fiscally sponsored project.
Yeah. So that varies for fiscally sponsored projects. Some sponsors will require nothing of you. Some projects like us, we require all of our fiscally sponsored projects to have an advisory board. Our governing board provides the oversight over our projects, but we require our projects to have an advisory board that functions similarly to an actual governing board, so that when and if you decide that becoming your own 501c3 is right for you, you already have that backbone of support to transition to. So I think it's really, really important to function as closely to being a nonprofit as is possible while you're fiscally sponsored, because that will make that transition easier if you do decide to be your own 501c3 eventually. I also think there are good reasons to have a governing board, because it creates greater ethics and transparency in an organization. There's lots of bad rules out there that are about gatekeeping and are about suppressing the work that we're doing. But that is one of the things that I actually respect, because I think our work should be more transparent. I see a question by Tiernan that says, what sort of databases are you talking about? Client info, finances, what do you recommend? This is a can of worms. I'm talking about all of them. And I also think that there's a lot of databases out there that, number one, will tell you that they do all of those things. They will collect your client data so that you can sort of like analyze impact. They will also do your donor information. I have not found one that satisfies my and our clients' needs that does both of those things well. A lot of companies will tell you that, oh yeah, we do both, it's fine. I disagree and have not found that. I think ultimately most organizations end up needing two databases, one for managing finance and donors and another for client information. I would also be very careful about sort of combining those two sets of information, especially for the privacy of clients. I get a little bit nervous putting those two groups together. In terms of what I like, the things that we've set up recently are Apricot, Zoho, and there's a couple others like Penelope we are vetting for client work. There's been a big consolidation in the sector under Bonterra, and that has sort of changed the landscape a little bit, and we're still trying to figure out like what still works well versus what's getting sort of dismantled under the Bonterra umbrella. In terms of finance donor management databases, the one I really like Flyway. But I think Little Greenlight is a decent platform. I think Bloomerang is a little bit more expensive, but a really good platform. The one that we have to be very careful in making the decision to use is Salesforce, because Salesforce is like buying a like Porsche when you need a Camry. So you're going to get a lot more than you might actually need in that sense. And it is very expensive to manage. Those free licenses that Salesforce gives really belie the true cost of the platform because it is so flexible. You're going to spend a lot of time setting it up for your needs. And the upfront cost, despite those free licenses, is actually really high. I have never seen a client set up a Salesforce database system for less than like $40,000 to $50,000. So, and you can do you can be much easier on yourself and get a little bit less flexible of a system like Bloomerang for a much better deal. When you get to the point where you're a multi-million-dollar organization, have a long history or serving hundreds, if not thousands of people, then Salesforce starts to make sense. But I see a lot of people getting sort of suckered into Salesforce thinking, oh, I could DIY this and there's these free licenses. We do lots of transitions off of Salesforce because it's just too much for clients. It's not really what they need. So take all of those sales promises with a grain of salt. Can you help with creating a board for us if we don't have one? I can provide you advice, but your board should be coming from your own network of people. We also talk a lot in the incubator about your board 1.0 versus your board 2.0 and how you make that transition from people you know to people that you don't necessarily know but support your work. So that's a very sort of robust conversation that we have. Is this application only for nonprofits in the USA? Yes. Unfortunately, because we are teaching the ins and outs of compliance, board management that are dictated by like IRS rules, it really doesn't make sense to have organizations that are supported in other countries because we don't know the rules and we don't want to give you bad advice that doesn't apply to your location. If you are fiscally sponsored in the United States and doing work in the United States, yes. But again, we don't specialize in any kind of international development work. So a large portion of the cohort would not apply. Yeah, we really don't do international development. It has sort of a set of requirements and governance and additional oversight needed to make sure that the work is impactful that we are not currently equipped to provide. When looking for partnerships, can you find board members in that space? Sure. The way that I've built out our board for the incubator has really been about my past work history, people that I went to grad school with, professionals that I've met in this space that are like, oh my gosh, I work with nonprofits all the time and they need this work so much. But we have recorded all of this, so if you miss anything, you're welcome to revisit. We'll send out the link for everyone. But I'm so happy to have had everyone here. I'm scrolling up. Ned, is it possible to do a fiscal sponsorship if we are already a 501c3? Yes, there are two options for that. I don't know if you're still around, Ned, but they are called Model C and Model B. Model A fiscal sponsorship is for people that don't already have their 501c3. And Model B and C are for people that already have their 501c3 but need some extra help in specific ways. So I'm happy to talk to you more about that, Ned.
Thank you.
Yes, WordPress. Don't do it to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Is it appropriate to offer a monetary stipend for the services that they provide? If you're talking about board members, no. Board members should never be paid. They are there to represent the interests of a public. A monetary stipend would be a conflict of interest. They should not be personally benefiting from the work that they do. It is a volunteer position with all of these legal responsibilities that go with it. Let's see. I'm trying to answer as many. How much is the incubator if you don't win the grant? I think we talked about that. Databases. Is Squarespace a good product? Yes, we love Squarespace. That's the product that we use. Pamela is just an expert in it if you need assistance with it. We do projects with our clients to help them set up that. Should board members be considered by insurance? Yes, absolutely. We recommend directors and officers insurance as well as general liability as at least the baseline for your organization. If you have nothing else, you need those two policies in place. Your board members are taking on this fiduciary legal relationship to your organization. If things go wrong, they are liable. So very important to get insurance to cover them. Otherwise, especially with lawyers, if you're getting lawyers on their board, they are going to want to protect themselves from liability. So yes, very, very important question. We are going to discuss that in the incubator as well. Can you explain a bit more what would be included in financial tracking systems? What are some good tools you recommend for startups? That's a good question. You should have some kind of financial tracking system. We use QuickBooks, but we also have a CFO on staff. So there is a bit of a learning curve. It's for accounting professionals. But getting a bill pay management system so that you can run payroll when you have people on payroll. Eventually, when you get big enough, we have a really great PEO, which provides all of our benefits, and that's really helpful. But you have to be big enough to make it sense. But at least somebody to help you pay bills and run payroll is the most important thing. Let's see. Oh, it's breaking up. I see all these. I'm sorry. I have that same question about donations from other state. This is a can of worms. Happy to discuss this offline. One resource I want to give you for making sure that you are appropriately registered, if that's a concern for you, is Harbor Compliance. They do really great work maintaining that. But really important to remember that the amount of time and money you spend on registrations in other states should be in proportion to how much you are receiving. So we talk about this at length in our incubator cohort as well. Would love to hear a little bit more to set up governance of a fiscally sponsored project. Pamela got that for me. We're going to share everything with you. If you are listening to this and this has brought up more questions for you, please email us. We're always happy to support you in any way. We're going to be having continuing ed throughout the year. We would love to see you again. Pamela got Emergent Strategy. Love Adrienne Marie Brown. We Will Not Cancel Us is also a great book that she wrote. And I see all of these great organizations that everyone is working with. Okay, I think we're good. You are all wonderful. Please reach out. Let us know if there's any way we can support you. We would love to see your incubator application. We would love to include you. Please send us your application, sign up for Give Butter. Even if you don't get included in the program, you might be able to raise funds and get a match as well. Let's see, I'm seeing this F.A. Brown, great. Yes, we saw your application. I see that you have time on the calendar on Monday. I believe you're going to be talking to Rachel on our team as well. Won't join now as we're operating outside the US, but great. Yeah, when you're fiscally sponsored, let us know. We provide fiscal sponsorship. So if that's something you're interested in reaching out about, we don't support organizations doing international development work, whatever that is. That takes a specific level of management that we can't do now, but and Livier, can Mockingbird support international organizations with only a specific area like strategizing fundraising? Yes, we can do like custom-based training. If you want to reach out to us, we're happy to sort of discuss that outside of the incubator. The incubator purely does training and fiscal sponsorship. So you need training in a specific area. We probably already have a training around that. We also have, I didn't mention this, a Teachable platform, which has some self-paced courses on it where you can, there's grant writing, there's strategic planning, there's, Pamela, help me remember what else is on it. Cultural competence and evaluation, I believe. We're also going to be adding, fingers crossed, this year we have the capacity to do it, but a course on financial and budget management that really takes a deep dive, because we're seeing that more and more as a need when we are doing fiscal sponsorship. Yes, Pamela, can you drop in the link to Teachable? It's on our website as well if you are looking for like self-paced courses. Can you apply for the incubator if you've already done it? Ned, you're going to learn the same things. But I do, Ned, I owe you an email both about fiscal sponsorship and other supportive services.
Okay.
I've just been underwater with launching the incubator and hiring and all these things, but we're happy to discuss working together as well. We do have a little bit of that.
Yeah, that's
So.
true.
Perfect. I'm
Great.
excited about that. Thank you everyone for your time. We'll send out a link to this so you can rewatch it. And if you have any questions, we're always here to support you. So we will see you soon.
So long.